Hi, it's Mark Bossert here, producer of the Pawlik Automotive podcast here with Mr. Bernie Pawlik, and we're talking cars. How are you doing, Bernie?
Doing very well.
So we're talking about a Chevy Suburban had a oxygen sensor replacement, which is a pretty common issue. What was going on with this large SUV?
Well, the check engine light was on. We scanned the vehicle computer, and there was two codes for heated oxygen sensor circuits for the front two oxygen sensors.
So what does an oxygen sensor do? I know we've talked about it with other vehicles, and how does it work?
Basically what it does, so there's a couple of functions for oxygen sensors. So this vehicle, it's a 2001, it's a little older, but the technology is the same and even right up to brand new. Essentially what the oxygen sensor does is it reads the oxygen content in the exhaust and it sends a signal to the vehicle computer. And with that, it can do a couple of things. So there are your front oxygen sensors. These are located in front of the catalytic converters, right at the downstream of the engine. And it'll read, is the engine running rich or lean? And it sends a signal to the computer. It's rich. The vehicle leans out, the computer leans out the fuel mixture, gets a signal it's lean, richens it up. And this cycle happens very quickly, like it's imperceptible. It richens and leans a mixture. So it makes quick readjustments for optimum fuel mixture based on what the computer wants. The rear oxygen sensors are located downstream of the catalytic converters. And what they do is they monitor the efficiency of the catalytic converter to make sure it's working. So essentially modern vehicles, it used to be in Vancouver, we'd have air care and a lot of the testing was done on a dynamometer with gas analyzers. You don't need to do that with any vehicles that are built after 1996. They're all self-diagnosing vehicles because it has an oxygen sensor in downstream of the catalytic converter. So that's essentially what an oxygen sensor is, and how it works is it basically it generates a voltage based on how much oxygen is in the exhaust. So it's basically a kind of self-generating piece.
So maybe let's just dig into a couple things. So rich and lean is referring to how much fuel there is in the air-fuel mixture?
That's exactly what it is. There's a certain ideal ratio of about 14.7 to 1. It depends on what condition. If you're stomping on the throttle and you want to go really fast, you want a richer mixture. If you're coasting down a hill, it goes leaner. But the vehicle computer is programmed for whatever that optimum mixture is. So yeah, it's a air to fuel ratio.
And when you were mentioning downstream, you're talking about what's coming out of the exhaust, going out the tailpipe.
Exactly. Yeah. Downstream is like from the engine. If you can imagine the exhaust is like a river, it's going down, river downhill. Exhaust, the stream of exhaust comes out of the engine and goes back to the tailpipe and out into the air.
And all this is in aid of basically the vehicle running good, but also it's an important factor in removing pollutants from the exhaust stream. Is that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In the olden days when cars had carburetors and they just kind of calibrated everything as best they could, there's no oxygen. Well, they actually went to a feedback carburetor, which actually had an oxygen sensor, and it would actually readjust the carburetor, but it was very crude. There's only a certain limited amount of adjustment you can make on a carburetor versus a fuel injection system, which is why everything's fuel injected. Just so much more control.
So are there any other types of sensors in the exhaust stream that are part of this process of making sure the engine's running right?
On a gasoline engine, there isn't, but we say oxygen sensor. There's actually a lot of vehicles use what's called an air-fuel ratio sensor. So in this Suburban is kind of older. It's a 2001. It uses an oxygen sensor in the front, but a lot of newer vehicles will use what's called an air-fuel ratio sensor. It performs the same basic function, but it works differently, and it's able to make adjustments to the fuel system much quicker and over a wider range. So it's often called a wideband oxygen sensor as well, but it works a little differently, but essentially the same function. They usually cost a lot more money than an oxygen sensor. But other than that, yeah, that's the only two ways they do it.
And how often do oxygen sensors wear out?
Well, this Suburban, it's actually got over 300,000 kilometers and the sensors have finally worn out. But they'll typically last 100 to 200,000 kilometers. It used to be, just a little history, in the olden days, the oxygen sensor used to be a single wire, and it would self-generate its own electricity, electric voltage signal usually from 0 to 1 volts, based on how much oxygen was in the exhaust. The thing is that took a while to warm. It would have to warm up and be at a certain temperature. So it would often take a few minutes of engine running to get that sensor warmed up. In the meantime, the fuel system is what's open loop. It's pumping out a lot of pollution. So what they did is they created a heated oxygen sensor, which everything has been for a long time. And heated oxygen sensors not only work almost immediately, like within a few seconds, but they also last a lot longer. So it's like in a single wire oxygen sensor in the past would never have lasted as long as the ones in this Suburban.
And how would I know if the oxygen sensor were worn out on my vehicle?
Normally, it's a check engine light issue. The check engine light comes on, and through diagnosis, we find the oxygen sensor is worn out. Occasionally, you'll have a physical problem, like the sensor will actually break apart, and maybe there'll be an exhaust leak. Not very common. Usually, 99% of the time, it'll be through the check engine light and diagnosis that you'll know that the sensor is worn out.
Is this a large job to replace these sensors?
Well, it can and can't be. The Suburban was absolutely miraculous and beautiful. Oxygen sensors are bolted into the exhaust, and you can imagine there's a lot of heat that takes place. There's a lot of rust that occurs, and so often when we go to remove them, they won't come out very easily. But when you install a new oxygen sensor, you always put some never seize, which is a compound that's supposed to prevent the threads, as the name implies, never seize. They obviously did well with this vehicle because all 4 oxygen sensors require a little crack of a wrench, and I was able to spin them all out by hand, which is kind of miraculous. We have a lot of vehicles where you go to undo it and it takes the threads out of the exhaust system and involves a lot of extra repair.
So what do you do in that case? Are you welding in a new piece into the exhaust system? Can you even do that?
Yeah, you can. Actually, you can cut the old piece off, and it's called an O2 sensor bung, and we can just weld another one in, and away it goes. So it's a bit of extra work. Now, depending on where it's located, it might actually be a lot of extra work, because some oxygen sensors are buried way in the engine compartment. There's no room to move, and so it can be a lot of work.
And this Suburban, as you mentioned, is getting on a bit in age. Is it still a worthwhile vehicle to keep on the road?
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's again, it's all about maintenance. But these like a 2001 Suburban, it's kind of when they changed to this newer style of vehicle. And really, I think GM has done a great job of these Suburbans and these pickup trucks of this era. They're far more reliable than they used to be in the past. Brakes last a long time. The engines are really good. Overall, a really good vehicle. I recommend them. I mean, keep them going. If you just do the maintenance as things need to be done and the repairs, and it's a good vehicle. It'll last a long time. I realize we've been talking a lot. We haven't shared any pictures, so let's have a look at a couple of pictures. These are the 4 oxygen sensors that were removed from the vehicle. The front and rear are actually different sensors, but they essentially, the function they perform is the same, but there's some calibration or something that's a little different between the 2 of them. So these are the 4 sensors that have been removed. You can see that these are the plugs that connect into the wiring harness. This is the end that screws into the exhaust system over here. And it looks kind of crusty and old because it is. The next picture we'll go to, this is a close-up view of the wiring connectors. I mentioned in the olden days, there was just a single wire oxygen sensor. Usually it was often on the GM was a purple colored wire. One of these wires is a ground wire to make sure there's a good ground to the sensor. And then the other 2 wires are for the heating circuit. So the heating circuit is monitored by the vehicle computer. And as I mentioned, there was a trouble code for this. If something goes wrong with the heating circuit, which is a frequent problem in these sensors, it'll set off a trouble code saying the heater's not working. And finally, a view of a 2001 Suburban. There we go. Still in good shape after all these years.
Awesome. So there you go. If you're looking for service for your Suburban or for an oxygen sensor replacement in Vancouver, the guys that see are Pawlik Automotive. You can reach them at 604-327-7112 or check out their website, pawlikautomotive.com, or our new podcast and channel on YouTube. Check us out. There's hundreds of videos on there. Thanks, Bernie.
Thanks, Mark.